May the meditations of my heart and the words of my mouth be acceptable to you, O God. Before we start meditating, I don't know if this is going to be the theme video for me, but I needed something to lighten up. So enjoy for a moment.
I have jammies just like those.
Thanks, Karen. You know, it's said in scripture that God's going to separate the sheep from the goats, and I don't know how he's going to do that when they're so darn cute. Come on. I thought about calling this sermon True Confessions of a Judgy Monkey. And let's just say that's the subtitle. So we exist in different modes depending on circumstances, but far too often when I'm on autopilot, I see that judgy monkey taking over. It happens again and again. It'll probably do so until the day I die. So that's why this sermon is called Trying to Embrace Brokenness. I think I'm somewhere at the beginning of that path. At least I have the sense that this is the direction I'm supposed to travel, and I hope that that's God's nudging. And because I'm at a place that feels like I'm really close to starting, it feels very weird to be doing a message about it. But then, you know, we often teach what we need to learn. We are the students of what we teach. So, oh boy, I need to learn this a lot better, so that the judgy monkey is less my autopilot. Now, if you think about scripture and you want to go back and count how many places there are about judging and embracing the broken, there are approximately 1 billion passages that are in scripture about that. And this is, I gotta tell you a little bit about my process of doing a sermon. You know, we want to know for the bulletin what the scripture is going to be about a week in advance so that we can put on the sign outside and all that kind of stuff. Well, I've been thinking about it, so, you know, a week out, I have a sense that's where, you know, this is my focus. But then by the time I actually sit down and write the sermon, which is last night, there's something else in my head. And it's a good thing that I wait until the night before, because if I started writing it last week, I would write 6 different versions. That's how my brain works. So anyway, here's one passage that Marlene didn't read. It's from Micah, and everybody knows that 6:8, to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God. So I'm going to leave love mercy for another day. And I want to talk about reconciling, acting justly, and walking humbly. The people in Micah's time had a really easy answer. Just follow out all the law that was laid out in the Torah. All, whatever, 620 something rules that are in the Old Testament, right? But our times are a little harder with more individual flexibility. At least we think so. Part of that is our culture of individuality. So to me, these ideas of acting justly and walking humbly are kind of in opposition. Where do I go when I want clarity? Da-da-da, to the dictionary. So I don't know if all of you know what etymology is. When I was a high school teacher, I used to play games, etymology games with my students. Let's get the dictionaries out and let's find a word that has interesting etymology, because this is the part that they're not even putting in dictionaries anymore. It's right after the word. There's funny brackets, not parentheses, and it says in italics, this word comes originally from here, and then it went to this language, and this was the form it took then, and all that. So that's kind of fun. Etymology tells us where it originates, the language it started with, its roots. The etymology of humble is the same as humus, dirt. To be humble is to be low, the equivalent of lying in the dirt. Yet, we're also exhorted to act justly, which requires getting up off the ground, looking around, evaluating and comparing. So then what happens to me all too often is that once I'm up, I'm on my way to figuring out how I can be right. I love being right, don't you? It's the constant temptation to discern right from wrong, just to end up on team win, yay! You know, I think it's interesting that that temptation is right there in Genesis. You know, we get tempted, Eve got tempted supposedly, but I think both of them got tempted to start discerning right from wrong. So, eating from the tree, I could have used that as a title too, if it hadn't occurred to me at like 8:58 this morning. So, there's an old fairy tale, and I don't know how many of you are familiar with it. It shows the inextricable relationship between comparison and judgment. Did you ever hear or read The Fisherman and His Wife? Some of us grew up with Grimm's fairy tales. So in it, a fisherman one day catches a flounder who begins to speak. I'm an enchanted prince, please let me go. And being a good man with mercy, the fisherman sets him free. He goes home, tells his wife the remarkable story. This is what happened to me today. And she gets upset. You had a magic fish and you didn't ask for anything? What is the matter with you? We live in a shack and you couldn't wish for something better? Go ask him for a nicer house to live in. So the fisherman's going to call the fish several times in this story. You know how to call a fish? You go, here, fishy, fishy. So practice, here, fishy, fishy. Here, fishy, fishy. Good. So her husband kind of sheepishly goes back to the ocean and calls the fish. Here, fishy, fishy. And he explains the situation, and the fish says, hey, no biggie, go home, already done, taken care of. And sure enough, when he gets back to his wife, she's sitting on the front porch of her charming little cottage, and when they go in, they find very delightful things like indoor plumbing. And the story never says anything about what the neighbors think, which I think is interesting. And peace reigns for a week or two. And then the wife turns to her hubby one day after dinner and sighs. Great big theatrical sigh. Well, what's wrong? He's got to ask. Oh, it's just that now when I go to town and I see what other women are wearing and what they buy, I feel like I wasn't thinking straight. Why didn't I ask you to tell the fish, make us rich? Those little pouts, and she manages to squeeze out a tear. Do you think you could go back, sweetie, to the ocean and ask for that, please? So of course the fisherman goes back and he calls, and sure enough, the fish appears. The husband conveys the wish, and once more the fish says, go home, it's already done. Fish can't snap their fingers, what the heck? Maybe a magic fish can. Sure enough, he goes home. There's a mansion with servants, a golden swimming pool, a garage full of luxury cars, and his wife is dressed in silks and furs from her head to her toes. She's got diamond dust in her fingernail polish, and she's eating oranges. This is a place that didn't even know about oranges, northern Germany, back in the day. So the fisherman and his wife have a short, pleasant time getting used to being rich. He spends hours polishing his beautiful cars while she sits by the pool and drinks pina coladas, watching soap operas on her outdoor TV. And at night, they go to the finest restaurants and clubs, and they even think about buying a vineyard and making some high-class wine, and then you know what happens. Wealth isn't enough. The next step is power. She wants to be king, or president, or emperor, and finally, because earthly power isn't enough, and this is the Middle Ages, she wants to be the Pope. And she gets them all. And is the Pope enough? Of course not. She wants to be God. On that last trip to the ocean, the skies are dark black. There's a terrible wind blowing down trees. The waves are 20 to 30 feet high. And the fisherman stands on the shore, yelling as loudly as he can. Awesome. And to his amazement, the enchanted fish pokes his head above the water and says, "What now?" When the fisherman conveys his wife's wish, the fish says, "You need a happy ending, dude. Go home, and all will be well." And sure enough, he goes home, and it's the original shack. The story says that they still live there happily. The moral of the story is that once you get on the comparison train, you'll never be happy. And remember, I said judging and comparing are linked together with a power so strong, even nuclear energy can't separate them. Judging, comparing, will make you dissatisfied and miserable. We know this from reading gossipy stories on the interweb about rich people. They're not happy. Imagine that marriage of the fisherman and his wife, one partner so puffed up and full of self. Remember Father Larry talking about that last week in the poem he read? God save me from being full of self. And I laughed when he read it because I recognized how full of self I can be. I said the subtitle of this should be True Confessions of a Judgy Monkey. Here's the confessions part. In my last message back in January, I said that I'd been wrestling with depression, and over the past several months, I figured out some of that. I was miserable and miserable to live with, partly because I was stuck in judgy monkey mind. I could not shift out of it. Nothing was good. I felt no real sense of gratitude, and I, for sure, was not loving with my fisherman husband. With the help of therapy, I've been recognizing what I can control and realizing how much of the problem in my life was me and my need to be right all the darned time. It isn't a big leap to go from right to righteous. One of the definitions of that word says it arises from an outraged sense of justice. And I think we all know this one, right? We live with it every day. The headline that's tailored to make your blood boil. Trump said this. Biden said that. Tucker Carlson is a shill for Putin. Rachel Maddow is so woke she never sleeps. Take a minute to think about what triggers your sense of righteousness. Seriously, think about it. What's your trigger that makes you go, oh, right? That's so wrong. Feeling righteous makes us feel full of ourselves. It gives us energy. And that's one thing I've really learned. watch out for that feeling of energy inside. It's like grabbing your moral armor and getting ready for combat. Slash, slash. And it feels so good. Yay, I'm a warrior for righteousness, or common sense, or human decency, or justice, or whatever. I'm a warrior for eating well for your first meal. I don't know. What's your trigger? So back to confession. Yep, I get these wonderful bursts of certainty and energy, righteousness, heck yeah, but not happiness. Righteousness is isolating because you are on your high horse named anger. So watch out for righteousness. And so let's go back to the other idea, that thing about humility being on the ground, low in the dirt. How do you get there? And why would you want to stay there? Too often it's through something breaking in your life. Something that just can't be pushed anymore. Unexpected tragedy or expected tragedy. Grief will do it every time. In my life right now, the main ingredient is my relationship with Jeremy, my addict son. He's out of jail. Yay! And I spoke to him a week ago, very, very briefly, less than a minute on the phone. Then he texted me to say his phone doesn't work. And he would see me tomorrow. And that was on Monday. Haven't heard from him since. I'm calling him the Chaos Kid. He's God's message saying, here's something totally uncontrollable. Hang on. Jeremy's brokenness is contagious. And thinking about him, being with him, feels like being in a room lined with glass shards. Everywhere I turn, it hurts. And there's no getting away from it. I have to embrace that. And then I think about Jesus. And he had to embrace his brokenness. The big realization is that not only are we in the dust when we're broken, we are dust. Ash Wednesday reminded me of that. If we are lucky or wise, we can stay in that realization more and more. The parts of life where we're broken are where light and love get to shine in. That's where humility is, where God can find us. And that's what I'm striving to remember, to hang on to, trying to embrace brokenness.
We love you,
Thank you. I know you do, if that's why I'm here. I think that's how we become the fruit in the vineyard. God plants us in the dirt, and that's where our sustenance and growth come from. He gives us light and rain, yeah, of course, but you know, if you pull something out of the soil, it's gonna die. If you try to live without humus, the humility, you are not going to live. You're gonna miss out on the great gifts of life. Gratitude, joy, contentment, laughter, love. And who knew that I'd end with a gardening metaphor?